I used to have two dogs named Pete and Birdie. They were both golden retriever dogs. I was originally going to write some books about the adventures of Pete and Birdie. Hopefully, they would have ended up as TV shows. Unfortunately, I'm not sure if I'm in the mood to write them. Here's the story. On Christmas Day when I was in second grade, my mom called me and my sister down on the news. "There's a surprise downstairs," she said. I went downstairs to see what it was. 2 puppies, I thought. What happened was, when my dad went to our house to buy 2 golden retriever puppies, he picked up the first dog, but then the second dog started crying. So then he put down the first dog and picked up the second dog, and then the first dog started crying. So we ended up getting both. I was so happy that I got 2 baby puppies for Christmas. They were so cute, and I got to hold them. We even filmed a videotape of me and Maeve receiving Pete and Birdie as puppies for Christmas. We named them Pete and Birdie. I had so many great memories with Pete and Birdie when they were babies. I got to hold them, and I even got to cuddle with them. All the guests who came over to my house even got to hold Pete and Birdie as well when they were babies. It was one of the happiest times of my life. Pete and Birdie were my first babies, and I especially got happy when I received 2 puppies after our previous dog, Guinness, passed away after a year-long fight with osteosarcoma. I had so many great memories with Pete and Birdie throughout the years. Everyone I knew loved them so much. I shared a lot of funny and crazy stories about them in my second grade class. They got so big really fast. At 6 months old, they already got too heavy to be held. They were big dogs. I began missing those memories of when they were babies. Even when they were 2 years old, it still felt like yesterday when I first got them on Christmas. I knew they were big now, and there was nothing I could do. One of my hopes was to get a furry critter to help me get not too attached to those memories. So, when I was in 4th grade, my family adopted a cat from my second cousin. A lot of the times, my cat would eat Pete and Birdie's food, and Pete and Birdie would eat my cat's food. They weren't separated at all when it was each of their meal times. My parents weren't aware that cat food is very toxic for dogs and that dog food is very toxic for cats. Cats and dog stomachs work differently than each other. When I was a freshman in high school, concert choir couldn't fit into my schedule because Learning Center had to meet every day. Lots of folks who double up on world language, study hall, science, and math don't get any electives at all, but that's very different as they chose to do it and weren't an accommodation class. Learning Center is an accommodation class. I was very depressed. When I was a freshman in high school, I was also assigned to be in all collaborative classes. Collaborative classes was a class with 2 teachers for the class. Collaborative classes were very limited on having a certain teacher for a class. It was a class with mostly Learning Center students, which is basically the same kids in other classes. I was very depressed that I couldn't be with the friends who care about me, nor could I have a certain teacher for a class. I was also depressed that I couldn't have certain students in my class, and mostly Learning Center students. When I was a freshman in high school, we had an 8-period daily schedule where you had to choose between a class and a lunch. It was so hard because there were so many cool electives to take, but at the same time, it's really hard to eat lunch in class because of food allergies, dirty work, and distractions. In addition, I love chatting with my friends, and lunch is the perfect time to do so. We also had a Science Lab Mini period. Science Lab Mini took up time from taking electives. Lots of other core academic classes such as math, global studies, and English don't have a separate lab mini period. Science, unlike those core academic classes, has one. They didn't have enough food selections at lunchtime, and we had awful snacks and drinks when the strict health policy came. I was very depressed as I missed the old food and the old snacks and drinks that they used to have. 23% of the folks from my middle school applied to private high schools. It was totally unexpected as 100% of the folks from my middle school feed into Ludlow High School. When I transitioned from elementary school to middle school, only 4% of the folks from my elementary school applied to private middle schools. I was very depressed that they were all gone. Things got really rough in my family after my grandfather died. After my grandfather died, My Uncle George from New York City, who doesn't like to help out at all in the family, revealed his true nature. After my grandfather died, Uncle George bailed out on all the traditions forever and made terrible, awful excuses on why he bailed out from them. He participated in traditions with his friends in Washington, D.C. and the Jersey Shore, despite those locations farther than Fairfield, Connecticut. He even went to Boston for a tradition, despite that location farther than Fairfield, Connecticut as well. I have done plenty of good deeds to him and his immediate family. Family is family, and we must get together and help out. Family comes first. Friends, long-distance friends, and traveling all come second. Things got really rough in my family after my grandmother sold her house. When she sold her house, she moved into a little apartment built onto the back of my aunt and uncle's house with one bedroom, one sitting room, one bathroom, and no kitchen. It has been a lot of work for my grandma to live there, especially since she has no kitchen. It's been not easy to visit my grandma since she shares the same kitchen and walkway as my aunt and uncle. As a result, since it's hard to visit her, she calls way too much and only one person can talk to her at a time on the phone when she calls a lot. Only one person can hear what she's saying on the phone, and we don't know what she's saying, so we don't know whether or not an emergency is occurring. In addition, my aunt spends a lot of her time taking care of Grandma, which takes up time from doing fun activities and could even keep me from doing night activities if my aunt and her family are away. My aunt cannot take care of Grandma all the time. It would be triple the amount of work for George and his family to stay because Aunt Diane already takes care of Grandma and there are no extra bedrooms in the family. Grandma's apartment is way too tiny, Paul's house is too small, my house has a cat, and Uncle George and Cousin Jamie are allergic to cats, and it costs money to spend the night at a hotel or a rental home in which Uncle George's plan not to come to Fairfield, Connecticut could result in that. The true person to talk about these little apartment problems to is my grandma, but the problem is it wasn't her decision to have this one bedroom, one bathroom, one sitting room, and no kitchen built off of her daughter's house. Aunt Diane suggested it, and Grandpa accepted it, and the family knew Grandpa wasn't going to move in with my aunt and uncle, as they knew he was going to die. Grandma didn't request for this little apartment built off the house, nor did she accept the offering from my Aunt Diane. Even worse, there have been two sides to the same story on how Grandma's apartment was decided, which has made it extremely complicated and more hard to resolve. It has been really hard. A lot of activity wasn't going the right way, and lots of memories were not turned out to be memories that were expected. I was extremely depressed. I had suffered a whole lot of depression from issues occurring in school, family, and life in general. I had thoughts of committing suicide and starting a new life because of all those depression issues. Instead of committing suicide and starting a new life, since I was too young to gain power, I decided to be a wizard and make things better by controlling by using magic and bringing imagination into reality. However, the imagination wizardry affected my grades, social life, watching great movies, TV shows, and some of my interests. I even forgot about how much I used to always feed Pete and Birdie during my imagination wizardry depression. Sophomore year started. I got concert choir on my schedule, an 8-period daily schedule turned into a block schedule, and I got a non-collaborative class, biology. I still dealt with a whole bunch of side effects from my imagination wizardry, since it messed up a lot in my life, so it was extremely hard for the side effects to go away. A lot of other activity not going the right way, and memories that were not supposed to be expected throughout the years, made it much harder to get rid of the imagination wizardry side effects. When I transitioned from high school to college, for my college application process, my parents both wanted me to live at home for college and commute. Despite the fact I have no control over those who don't understand my disability, despite the fact university campuses are not meant for students to live at home and commute, and despite the fact community college and then transferring to a university will result in a double transition, and despite the fact community college or a gap year will not help you get a full adjustment to university campus as a transfer student, as you won't get any intro presentations or orientations. After me and my family got back from Vermont from Christmas break, we got a call from our dog sitter that Pete wasn't doing too well. He was throwing up and acting all lethargic. That's when his cancer started occurring. The next day, me and my mom took him to the vet. They gave him a shot, but they didn't test him to see if he had cancer. After me, my dad, and my sister got back from Sacramento, California to see my dad's family while my mom stayed home since she had to work, we heard news from her that Pete wasn't doing too well. Has been acting all lethargic ever since previous Christmas break and may have cancer. So I was afraid about what was going to happen with him. Quadruple times as stressed since the vet was closed that day, Pete was sick, and I had school and play rehearsal the next day. 3 days later, I was given the news that Pete was diagnosed with lymphoma cancer. He was offered tough cancer medicine that would give him more time, but apparently it would only give him 6 to 12 months of life. We thought it was no use spending all that money, especially since we spent so much money on my tuition and bills for college at the University of New Haven. So, we gave him some cancer oil, cancer medicine, and I even walked him every day. It gave him 6 weeks to succeed his cancer. After we got back from Vermont Memorial Day weekend, Pete was acting all lethargic again. He was acting all slow and was breathing very heavily once again. Birdie seemed to be much more enthusiastic about walks than Pete was. The last week of Pete's life, Pete was acting even more lethargic. Every morning when I got up to get ready for my senior internship, he had trouble getting up, so I had to help lift him up. The third last day of his life, he only rested on the walk when I chatted with a woman who was babysitting 2 children and was looking for a 7-year-old boy who took off on his motorized toy car. The second to last day of his death, on the walk, Pete rested 5 times on the way back. He even rested when he was in the way of something. It was a sign that it was closer to taking him to the vet. Cancer was making him tired. The last day of his life was not so good. That same day, I stayed home and had a day off from my senior internship because my advisors weren't there that day. My mom noticed how thin he was. He went underneath the computer desk. That was very unusual because the only time he, alongside Birdie, went underneath the desk was when I was on the computer and they both wanted to see me. Knowing that it was an even closer sign that he was going to go to the vet soon, I was very stressed. Knowing he would be up there with Sasha, Charlie, Coco, Sadie, Riley, Guinness, and etc. soon, my dad texted me that if he can't go to the bathroom by himself, it'll be time to take him to the vet as we can't carry him around. Pete peed on himself and pooped on himself on the patio while me, my mom, and sister went strawberry picking that day. When my dad got home, we realized it was time to take him to the vet. Me and my dad took Pete to the vet that same day. We realized that it wasn't going to be the same without him. He even had trouble getting into the car on the way to the vet. We even had to carry him in the car. He even had trouble getting up to the steps at the vet. He put his paw print on some clay, and the vet shaved off some of his fur. The vet put him down while me and my dad were down. I was in the room when he died with him. I was the first to notice him dead. I noticed there he passed away, only at age 10 and a half, too young. Me and my dad came home to tell my mom and my sister the news that Pete was dead already. He was going to be burned into ashes and cremated. I was very sad when he died, spreading word to family about what happened, and my dad spread word to his workmate and friends, knowing that remembering all those good times would help, but it wouldn't because it just wasn't the same without him. I felt very cold since he was dead, despite the fact it was June and it was hot outside. With all those depression side effects that I dealt with after grade 9 depression, Pete's death at age 10 and a half years old was one of the issues that made it much harder to get rid of the imagination wizardry side effects, so it didn't help me express or get knowledge on what my parents or the vet could have done better, especially since this was one of the memories that wasn't supposed to be expected for my senior year of high school. It was hard as a family since it was a dog, but to Birdie, that was his brother that he lost. He slept behind the door waiting for Pete to come home for 3 weeks and felt even more lonely during thunderstorms. I even refused to watch Pete and Birdie Christmas on videotape since I was depressed over Pete not being with me to cherish those memories. I was also worried about watching Maine videotape and Vermont videotape since it features Guinness, our previous dog, and was disappointed that Guinness, who was even heavier than Pete, lasted 2 years longer than Pete. I felt too nervous to walk Birdie and waited 4 weeks after his death because I was worried about people asking me where Pete was, and I needed time to recover from Pete's death before walking Birdie. My mother at first thought I was worried that the sensitive lady from Riverfield School Little League baseball games would yell at me for bringing a dog on school grounds. Pete died 2 weeks before my high school graduation, 3 weeks before my University of New Haven orientation, and about 2 months before I started school at the University of New Haven. I even remember when he died. It was around the same time me and my family had to fill out some paperwork to get ready for the University of New Haven fall semester. After I started school at the University of New Haven as a commuter and lived at home, it didn't help me express what I felt like my parents or the vet could have done better. In addition to extreme limits to college applications, as there's barely any colleges local within my community that are a good fit for me, double transition and lack of intro orientation if I intended community college or a gap year, the fact you won't get engaged with university campus as a commuter student, and the fact university campuses are not meant for students to live at home and commute. One of the minor reasons why I hated living at home and commuting to college was because I had to deal with home troubles, and it was harder to move on with my life after deaths, retirement from jobs, moving, and going away to college occur, since I couldn't move on with my life by living on a college campus. When I was a commuter at the University of New Haven, I was frustrated that I couldn't move on with my life by living on campus and leaving home after I had to suffer moving on after Pete died. After I left the University of New Haven because of bad disability services and transferred to Norwalk Community College for a temporary school, and I felt relieved that the faculty who humiliated me could no longer have any contact with me. One of my hopes was to transfer to University of Connecticut fall 2020 semester. That'll be the life. I'll be out of the house, and we can start watching Pete and Birdie Christmas on the videotape, knowing I'll be moved on, living on campus, and no more home troubles, I thought. Sometime in the middle of my second year of college, Birdie was peeing a lot. We heard word from our house sitter after me and my dad were skiing in Vermont for the week. Me and my mom took him to the vet. They didn't test for any cancer, so we took him home. About 2 weeks later, Birdie was throwing up, acting very slow, breathing so hard, and wasn't eating. We took him to the vet. While I was in my digital songwriting class, my dad called me to report what Birdie had detected. He had cancer. His cancer, unlike Pete's, was too late. They couldn't give him any surgery, nor was there any medicine. His death was even more unexpected than Pete's death. Birdie had to be put down and passed away that same day, knowing that he was going to die within the next few days. Since I was at community college and living with my parents as an adult, especially since I never wanted to attend community college in the first place, it didn't help me express what my parents or the vet could have done better. So I expressed it as, I need space away from home since it's not fair that university residents don't have to deal with this kind of home troubles, so I stayed away from my house for 10 days. Only 12 years old, and was even fast at the age of 10, almost 11 years of age. I even at the time did some calls for transcripts from Fairfield Public Schools, University of New Haven, and Norwalk Community College to see if I could transfer to the University of Connecticut around the same time, since my parents always expected me to be at community college even though I had thoughts of transferring. A month later, after Birdie's death, after we went into lockdown from the COVID-19 pandemic, transferring got even harder. Public open space areas were shut down and closed, so that made it tricky for those who had a dog. I did some research on what causes cancer in dogs. Lots of research online states that there are some foods that are toxic for dogs and some foods that are good for dogs. It states that cat food is very toxic for dogs and that dog food is very toxic for cats. Research also stated that cat food is one of the things that can increase cancer in dogs. Remembering that my parents gave Pete and Birdie cat food and my cat dog food sometimes, or sometimes even just let them eat the wrong food. I also learned that there are some foods that can increase a dog's chances of getting cancer. Remembering that Pete wasn't tested when he was throwing up back Christmas break senior year, and remembering that Birdie wasn't tested to detect whether or not he had cancer. Just infections they tested. I realized if the vet could have tested Pete and Birdie earlier, they could have had a little bit of a longer life. There have been lots of morals and lessons that have came after the vet tested my dogs and after my dogs Pete and Birdie died. Here they are. If a dog or cat has symptoms, the vet must be aware that these symptoms could be a sign of cancer. Pets, unlike humans, don't have the ability to open doors or tell the owner, "We don't feel well, we're sick," as they do not have hands. One of the things I remember is that the vet didn't test Pete and Birdie to detect if they had cancer when their symptoms started. So vets must test dogs and cats if they have any symptoms right away to see if they have cancer. Vets shouldn't suppose that these symptoms are just a general sickness. There is another moral and lesson that had come between my parents when my dogs ate my cat's food and when my cat ate my dog's food. Here it is. If you have a cat and a dog, be careful, and you must separate the two when they are eating. Do not let your cat eat dog food, and do not let your dog eat cat food. Cat stomachs and dog stomachs are different from each other. They're not the same. The first reason why I was unable to express what I felt like the vet and my parents could have done better is because of the imagination wizardry depression side effects. My abnormal response when I dealt with grade 9 depression was still locked in my mind and wasn't let out of my mind yet when Pete died. Pete's death at age 10 and a half years old was one of the activity that didn't go the right way for my senior year of high school, and one of the memories that wasn't supposed to end up like this for my senior year of high school. Because of the abnormal response from grade 9 depression was still locked in my mind, I wasn't able to get knowledge on what my parents or the vet could have done better. The second reason why I was unable to express what I felt like the vet and my parents could have done better is because I was frustrated that I couldn't move on with my life by living on a college campus and leaving home. Pete died 2 weeks before my high school graduation, 3 weeks before my University of New Haven orientation, and 2 months before I started school at the University of New Haven. Since I had to suffer moving on after Pete died at a young age, I was frustrated that I couldn't move on with my life by leaving home and living on a college campus. Because of that, I didn't get knowledge about what my parents and the vet could have done better. The third reason why I was unable to express what I felt like the vet and my parents could have done better is because I was frustrated that I had to deal with home troubles. Birdie died during my second year of college, and it was around the same time I had thoughts of transferring to University of Connecticut fall 2020 semester. I never wanted to attend community college, and university campuses are not meant for students to live at home and commute. So, because of that, and because I blamed it all on living at home with parents, I didn't get knowledge on what my parents and the vet could have done better, and instead wished I could get peace away from home troubles. This knowledge on what my parents and the vet could have done better all didn't come in my mind until after the lockdown hit for COVID-19 restrictions. Since I was stuck in my house all day every day and was extremely bored, I thought it was a good opportunity to get knowledge on what causes cancer in dogs, as Birdie died a month before the lockdown.